Okay, today is 4/22/2023. It is Earth Day. So happy Earth Day to all you climate change accelerationists. That's who I assume is listening. I don't think any climate change cultists are among us. At least there shouldn't be. In fact, yesterday I was watching CNN or monitoring the propaganda streams, and I saw a commercial for a place called Noah's Ark, where it's a scale model of Noah's Ark, and you can take your kids. It's real, it's big, and it's very immersive. It's kind of like a Disneyland, but just one particular ride. You just go in, look around, brainwash your kids, tell them what's going to happen if they don't mitigate their carbon footprints. Oh, no, wait, no, that's the old model. It used to be if you don't stop your wickedness, the God's going to flood you. Now it's if you don't mitigate your carbon footprint and reduce your dinosaur fuel usage, the globe will flood you. But the globe is the God construct. And that's why they renamed NOAA from the Bible the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Same old NOAA, same symbol, a dove, same agenda. The priest mitigating the globe or the God's wrath to control you. I mean, how many of you go to NBC and do the climate change confessions? Probably none of you. Like, I try to turn people off of recycling. It's a waste of your own energy. Joined by Rocco Calzone says Noah's Ark with dinosaurs. Yeah, I don't know if we had any dinosaurs on Noah's Ark, although there are dinosaurs on the moon according to science. And the same scientists constantly tell us about things coming down from space, and they use, instead of feet or meters, they use animals as units of measurement. Like there's an asteroid the size of 69 alligators coming our way. Or there's 10 camels high, this big chunk of rock, 10 camels high, and it's going to hit us. I'm like, what is going on here? It's almost like Noah's Ark in space exploded and all the animals are raining down. Always just aimed at brainwashing children. Adults ignore this stuff. Like, oh, it's the size of 5 elephants and 2 crocodiles. Like, that's how you talk to kids. That's not science. It's like Sunday school for adults. Like, you can laugh at the people with their Noah's Ark, but guess what? The world was just ogling at Elon Musk's space ark. There is no difference between the Starship and an ark. In fact, even he has made the comparison. Elon Musk tweeted an image of a rocket going to space with NWO soldiers blocking the masses, and only a few people were allowed in and some animals. It's a space ark. Same program. All right, we're joined by Benton says, I stopped recycling, thanks IPS. You know, if you say climate change is a hoax on TikTok, they kick you off. And the CCP probably takes down your name and number, IP address. Same thing if you confess your sins on NBC's Climate Confessional. It goes straight to the CCP. Cubstar says they just found dinos on Mars. Yeah, I thought I saw that. I've seen squirrels. I've seen flies. I mean, we've seen all kinds of things on Mars. T-Dog135 says, what's up, Helmet Karen NPC? Yes, this channel is called Helmet Karen NPC because I figured if I label it such, it'll go beneath the radar. No one's going to censor a channel that is a Helmet Karen. That's ahead of your time. Mask Karens, yeah, nobody cares anymore, but Helmet Karens, that's coming. Copaesthetic says, crack truth serum through my veins. Yeah, this is the only media network out there that isn't rooted in blind faith belief to whatever the mainstream media promulgates. We actually know what's going on, which is a huge difference. You have believers versus believers, the cult in blue, the cult in red, Democrats, Republicans, and they don't realize that, no, they're controlled by the top. You know, the purple of royalty, the red and the blue mixed. It's a false paradigm, false left-right paradigm. And you have the woke and the red pill. You know what? The woke and the red pill are the same toxin. And you hear this cliche about how far left and far right, eventually they kind of meet. They kind of become like a imitation of one another. They actually become the same thing. Like they reach the same end. And you can see this with Antifa versus Patriot Front. Or more recently, you had one of the most vocal anti-groomer, anti-drag shows for kids protesters, Alex Stein, who's now a drag queen. He's got a drag show on Blaze TV. And you can't tell me it's not drag. He dresses in drag and he puts out a lot of very lewd comments and jokes and statements that aren't fit for children. Like, I would protest Alex Stein's show if he was inviting children. In his last one, the theme was, he's in drag and his boyfriend's getting his girlfriend pregnant, and then his boyfriend wants him. And he starts talking about the different ways they're going to do it in explicit terms. Like, I'm telling you, he went full circle. Now he's on the other side. That's how it works. But they're all in the same circle. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the world stage is a closed system. And if you're on it, you're basically in the mud. There's that expression from Mark Twain, never wrestle with a pig because you both get covered in mud and the pig likes it. Well, the world stage is a big pig pen, as most of you here have noticed. Benson says it had 33 engines, then it blew up. Yes, 30 out of 33 ignited. And one of their rockets, they added 9 rocket engines to it to make it 42. Now, the 33, if you didn't know, and the thing blew up on purpose. The 33 represents your spinal cord. It really does. Spinal column, the vertebrae. It represents the fire snake. That's the consciousness rising from the bottom chakra, from the kingdom to the crown, which is up above, from black to white, from 10 to 1, like they do their countdowns. If you're looking at the Kabbalistic tree of life as a model of the cosmos and consciousness within it, and what you're seeing is just allegory. The rocket going to space and blowing up just represents the third eye opening. It represents transcendence, ascending above the material realm into the heavenly, cosmic consciousness. And it has other connotations as well, some of them a little more mundane, having to do with procreation. But ultimately, it's the mystic aspect to this paradigm we've been given to replace the old archaic concepts of heaven. Space is heaven. Digital transcendence is going to be a thing. Rocco Calzone says, I liken the world to Animal Farm by Orwell. The pigs are wearing clothes. Right, exactly. And it's a closed system. I've been looking at that movie Snowpiercer as a pretty good analogy of how things work, where everyone's on a train. It's a runaway train. You can't get off, and the people at the very front know the big secret, that they're cannibalizing the people at the very back. And it's notable that the train conductor is the guy who plays Christoph in The Truman Show, which is another closed system. And The Truman Show is a great example of a world built on lies. And that's what we live in. Truman is just a microcosm for all of us. And all the people around him, the liars, the stagehands, the ones looking from above, they represent the hyper immersive, overly saturated with media environment that we're in. They represent the media, government, academia. They represent the entertainment to the extent that it's all being used to this purpose of Psy-war and promulgating this false paradigm, this one world view, which again, it's gone out without a hitch. They replaced the old world order with the new one, and nobody's noticed. If anybody's still saying the new world order is coming, it's like, you were born in this eternal order that never changes hands. They just change the scenery once in a while. And as they've expanded, they needed something a little more all-encompassing. The old archaic concepts of flood myths, of sin. Yeah, you can't really regulate people who don't believe in God or the devil anymore. And this new paradigm also includes space as a heaven for the atheists who don't believe in heaven. And they've turned atheists into fundamentalist believers in a cult. In fact, today we're celebrating Earth Day, which is one of the greatest examples of this cult. So let's go ahead and discuss this. Cubstar says, Ed Harris plays the man in black in Westworld 2, another closed system. Right, Christoph, Ed Harris. That's a very key character there. His role, he plays Urge. He's the creator of the false world, the world that entraps the true man and keeps him a false man until he escapes. He plays the same archetype in Snowpiercer as the conductor to the closed system train, And yes, in Westworld. And that's why he wears the black brimmed hat. That represents the rim of Saturn. It represents the rings of Saturn, the Saturnian god of death. Again, the bottom, the kingdom, is the black. The crown is the white in their symbolic system. And this is typical where actors are used to play the same archetype in multiple movies. He's the antagonist that has to be overcome. And if you haven't seen Westworld, it's from the perspective of entities or artificially intelligent synths that become aware that they are conscious beings. But every single day, they have a reset. So they never remember. Meanwhile, this bad guy gets away with killing them every day. And the next day, they just have amnesia. They don't remember. He's the bad guy. And until they start having a continuity of consciousness between days, they're not able to break free. And that perfectly explains how these resets work and how you have a way of keeping the public amnesic to the control system represented by the man in black who has to be overcome. He's got a knife usually, and he definitely represents Saturn. If you look at all the old images of Saturn, he's got a scythe, he's got the sickle, or he's devouring a child. This is all very symbolic, of course. It's not meant to be taken literally. He's the knight, and the child represents the sun. It's all very much just symbolism. But when you look at these movies, they refresh it, bring back the same exact archetypes all the time. All right, we're joined by Salty Siren, HLG, and Sledge. Thanks for joining. Now, let's continue. It's Earth Day, and I wanted to get into a few things. One, the climate change activists, the cultists, have a group called Tire Extinguishers, Tyre, Tire Extinguishers. And they're going around deflating tires on SUVs on Beacon Hill. On Wednesday night, 43 luxury SUVs had their tires deflated. And the group passed out flyers. They took credit for it. I mean, this is eco-terrorism. Now, they think that they're saving the planet. They really do. Most of them are true believers. But the fact of it is, they're just communists, and they're doing the work of their handlers. They're useful idiots, and they're stooges. I mean, how are the environmentalists where you are celebrating Gaia today? Self-immolation, vandalism, tire slashing, laying in the street. These are all things that they do. Throwing paint on banks. The climate activists are more or less just vandals. Now, when you go back to the beginning of Earth Day, and I've mentioned this character before, it was actually created by a guy named, well, they call him the Unicorn Killer. Let me go to Murderpedia. The Unicorn Killer. He was an anti-war activist and a hippie guru. Now, the leftists today aren't anti-war anymore, you'll notice. Now, what he did back in I think it was in the 90s, but yeah, he was tracked down in 1997. His name is Einhorn, which means one horn. They call him the Unicorn Killer. But basically what happened is he composted his girlfriend. And I'm like, that is about as green as you can get. Talk about recycling and everything. He recycled his girlfriend. And I think he put her into a trunk, and the neighbors noticed. Yeah, here we go. It was in 1981. Okay, in 1981, they found the remains of his girlfriend, who was a cheerleader, in a trunk in his apartment. And she had been there for 18 months. He slept with her corpse stuffed in a trunk next to his bed. And for a year and a half, he got away with it until the neighbors complained about the stench. And then they found her remains. So he tried to compost her. Now, again, why did he do it? I don't know. I think he was just doing it to be green, to please Gaia. Human sacrifice. And that is what their cult is about. It's a cult of sacrifice. Give up this, give up that, recycle that, do it less, travel less, breathe less. It's a cult of human sacrifice. Breed less, have less children. Now, they know you won't go with it if they just tell you to just throw your kids into a chipper, but they will condition you to sacrifice in little ways. Death by 1,000 small sacrifices. That's what I used to go watch the recyclers at the recycling bin, genuflecting before the green god, before Gaia. I would just walk before Lord Ball, and I'm like, look at these good believers with great intentions. They feel so guilty about their consumer purchases that they're over here on a Saturday morning recycling. And I guess this is meant to make them feel better. And of course, everybody doing this will prevent the globe from flooding the world. No, he didn't have her in a car trunk. He had her in a trunk in his room. All right, continuing. I'm looking at the NBC News Climate Confessional. These are anonymous. For example, waste nothing. I was taught to eat everything on your plate. We grow some of what we eat and we compost the rest. Okay, that was a brag. That wasn't a confession. Okay, here's one. I still eat red meat. I've been trying to like beans for 10 years. I use reusable plastic bags to offset deforestation. Here's one. I still use plastic bags. You know, even before they made us wear dunce caps, they were already flexing by making us switch from paper to plastic to no bags, to reusable bags, back to no bags, back to plastic bags. They went from plastic bags to paper. Then they said, no, that's bad for the trees, climate change. Then it's like, bring your own bags. Then COVID happens. Like, you can't bring your own bags because they're infectious waste. So use the plastic bags and throw them away. Now people start using the plastic bags and throwing them away. Well, this angers Gaia. And then people are left, well, who's more important? Do we save ourselves from the pandemic, or do we put Gaia first? And right after the pandemic started, there was satellite imagery from NASA, which we know is real and you can trust it all because it's just pictures from space. And it's like, look, 3 months after the lockdown started, the air is so clean that lives will be saved from removing pollution. More lives will be saved than will be lost to the COVID. So they kind of, in an indirect way, made the argument that, you know, we could just shut down the economy once in a while and save lives and save the planet. We can do both. Continuing. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running for president on the Democrat side. And I'm wondering, how does this comport with the broader belief about Kennedys among the QAnoners? The QAnoners believe that the bloodline of Christ, like if you read those Dan Brown books, basically the bloodline of Christ, because he had a baby with the Magdalene and they're still secretly ruling the world, or they're trying to. Well, they tried to. JFK was the second coming of Jesus, according to Q, and they killed him. But then his son is the third coming, and he's grown up and he went into hiding, and he's going to reveal himself any day now and save us. Or so their lore goes. However, JFK never showed up. JFK Jr. never showed up. But now RFK Jr. is like, I'm going to run for president. And I'm thinking, wait, if they're the bloodline of Christ, and we'll just assume it's true for the purpose of argument, this is the Merovingian bloodline. They're straight from Jesus. And RFK Jr. is the closest thing we have to God right now. And he's going to run on the Democrat side. How does that make sense? If Trump is the guy that's being backed by the Kennedys, if he's the one charged with executing the plan, why is this guy running for the other side? Like, that's very concerning to me. And here's one of his quotes. RFK Jr. said, quote, climate change is a public health crisis. The science is really strong in telling us that with climate change accelerating, we should expect heat waves to be more frequent and more intense and to last longer. That wasn't Greta. That's RFK Jr. How are they still trusting the plan? Is anybody still trusting the plan? And I've been watching a lot of these characters who are promulgating the Q stuff, and I'm pretty sure most of them are paid. Like, this is some kind of grassroots campaign to shore up the conspiracy theory vote. There's no way that these are legitimate accounts. I've been examining a lot of them, and they have certain methods of marketing that are pretty strong. Like, I got a video of Hillary Clinton covered in blood wearing the skin of a little girl over her face, but it's so terrible I can't show it to you. And then other people in the comments are like, that's okay. I don't need to see it. Just knowing it exists makes me trust you. Let's fight the plan. Like these commenters are even fake. It's a huge shill fest. Somebody's buying a lot of this stuff that's going out there. I don't know if there's any real life QAnon believers at this time. And most of the ones who took it seriously or semi seriously are savvy enough not to, you know, stand in front of it anymore. They've all kind of backed out. Okay, continuing. Joseph Goebbels said, always accuse your enemy of that which you are guilty. Okay, well, that goes for the America First. That goes for all the conservative anti-groomers. And pretty much that also goes for the mainstream media. Now, we all know about Ollie Alexander and the fact that Fox News won't denounce him, that Jack Posobiec won't denounce him. All the people that were rubbing elbows with this individual who has a lot of power because he slept his way to the top, starting with Karl Rove, they won't denounce him after he's been exposed as having been preying on teenagers for years, which makes me think it's a mutual blackmail society and nobody tells on anybody because everybody has dirt on everybody. And this is also concerning, and it doesn't seem to be bothering Fox, but Ellie Alexander, the predator, literally has compromising blackmail material on a United States representative. Like that should be a big deal. MTG has some kind of connection to Ollie Alexander. They've shared information about one another, but he has said he could actually destroy her with this information. And just having compromising material on a U.S. representative is a pretty big deal, but it's being ignored. But again, they're all psychopaths in a blackmail ring involved in who knows what, not just human trafficking, but they're accusing Democrats of what? Well, everything that they're apparently doing. And by the way, Trump was at a pizza party yesterday, and not only did he eat a pizza in front of everybody, but he put it out there and he said, he kind of offered it out there like he was going to sell it like in an NFT. I mean, he is like one of the top NFT salesmen, former president. But yeah, he waved around the pizza as though someone was going to jump up and buy it, which I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he signed Bibles. Now, the media does the same thing. They do a lot of projecting, like Goebbels had advised, where they're perpetrating a hoax, a psyop. And you call it out and you say, hey, that's a hoax. And they say, oh, you're a hoaxer, which makes no sense. You'd be like a stage magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat and you call it out and you say, oh, that's fake. And they call you a hoaxer. Oh, like you're a magician. Like, no, you're literally doing stage magic and we're calling it out. And now you're calling us hoaxers? Sorry, I'm not the hoaxer. I'm just the kid calling the Naked Emperor what it is. Cubstar says MTG has been a bad dog, big bad dog. Yeah, there's this rumor that the dirt that Ollie has on her is that when she puts on wraparound shades, she's Dog the Bounty Hunter. Now, I don't know. Sounds like an internet rumor. A lot of people are digging into this one. Like, for example, Alex Jones was personally warned about this situation years ago. Well, months ago. Probably last year. Who knows how long they've known. InfoWars is somewhat culpable because Ollie Alexander was trading in their name, meaning he was offering people jobs at InfoWars in exchange for collateral. Now, he doesn't officially work for InfoWars in any capacity. He's not their human resources. However, apparently, if you were to tweet him a picture of your eggplant emoji, you might get a seat next to Alex Jones. Not quite sure how that works, but Jones needs to answer for it, or at least scrub the guy off their website. Commenter asks, any number correlation with the coronation of King Charles the 8th of May? One thing that's notable is 3/11/2020 novel Corona, the new crown. 911 days later, the queen dies. That death happened to be coincidentally 1,776 days after the first Q drop. So if you think about it, Q drop, queen is the Q, queen drops. 1776, there's a 9/11 in there, very peculiar. And these dates aren't nothing. It's a big deal. It really does show some intelligent planning here, like Trump's Mar-a-Lago raid, 8/8/2022. Text Trump, 8/8/022. Then 33 weeks and 3 days later, he gets his indictment, which happened to be on the anniversary date of Reagan getting shot. I mean, these are not coincidences. Okay, I have something else for Saturn Day I wanted to get to, having to do with Harry Potter. But first, one more thing. The FBI has the manifesto, they have the tranifesto of the gun person who shot up the Nashville school, and they are not releasing it yet. According to Metro Nashville Council member Courtney Johnston, the manifesto, if in the wrong hands, would be astronomically dangerous. Okay. Something about this manifesto. We have the one from the Louisville shooter, who was a Redditor, who apparently was so anti-gun, he decided, I'm going to get a gun and shoot a bunch of people to make a point about guns. Like, that's not even slightly believable. But that's the story. I'm sorry. It's not believable to critical thinkers. But the masses have lapped it up. The right wing has lapped it up. Jack put all these characters on the right, without even having to name them, they all take their marching orders from the same place. I know their opinions before I even hit play on their most recent podcasts. All the individuals on the right are now suddenly all about the mass shooting phenomenon. They didn't care when it was MAGAs, when it was right-wing neo-Nazi types. They're like, oh, it's one of ours. But now they care because all the shooters are on the left, and they're all waiting to see, what's this manifesto? What's so incendiary that it might cause what, some kind of copycat effect? Now, let me find that piece here. Here it is. This is from Emma Watson. Emma Watson is from the Harry Potter series. Going through your comments here. Okay, again, this is Saturn Day. And she turned 33. She said, holy moly, before I was 29, I hadn't even heard of a Saturn return as a concept. Let's just say now I am well acquainted. Now she's talking about Saturn returning to the place where it was at the point of her birth, which happens when you turn 29. And apparently it goes through that area for the next few years. And the Saturn return concept is something that we kind of experienced with the Great Reset, where it was the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter on a winter solstice, the likes of which hadn't happened since Jesus was born and we went back to zero on the year. I mean, perfect for a reset. Or last year on 2/2/2022, Pluto returned to 27 Capricorn, the point where it was when America was born. So it was America had a Pluto return. Well, here's Emma talking about her Saturn return. And she said, I stepped away from my life and I learned to surf, rode horses, learned how to make gin, adopted Sophia in Mexico, an angel, not a dog, Harry Potter reunion, played pickleball and golf. Anyway, she goes on for a long time about all these things she did in the last few years discovering herself. Quote, I eat green things now. I make things with square space. And today I feel like blah, blah, blah. But here's the part I wanted to get to. She says, thank you to the witches in my coven who were so pivotal in helping me arrive at where and who I am now. Now, nothing too heavy there. I'm just pointing it out that we talk about how the billionaires use astrology, that millionaires don't, as per JP Morgan, who wants to use governments and corporations to seize private property to save the planet. This is just more evidence. It's the culture. Hollywood is all about witchcraft. The media is all witchcraft. It's all black magic when you get down to it. I mean, lying is the basic form of, if you ask me, lying is the basic form of psychological warfare, gaslighting, and even what they term magic, which is, or black magic, surreptitious mind control through nefarious means. And they're all part of this system, and it's their religion. Going through your comments. Cubstar says Moon 29 days, Saturn 29 years, the closest and the furthest. Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. You're right. Closest and the furthest luminaries. Julian Assange has a tweet here, assuming he's real. I mean, Julian Assange is almost totally just a construct at this point. I'm surprised people care about these fake whistleblowers. And when I say fake whistleblowers, it's like a movie whistleblower. Nothing he's saying pertains to the real world. It all just builds on the existing false construct. But he said this: every war in the past 50 years is a result of media lies. Like that's supposed to be profound or something. But it's only a half truth. How about this? Every war in the past 50 years is a result of media lies, or I would say is a fabrication of media lies. You know, these assumptions that everything's real, but it's being distorted by media only takes you deeper into the fiction. None of these individuals will say that's fake. Their starting point is it's real, but it's worse than they say. It's bigger than what they say. Oh, speaking of the coronation, the Pope gave a couple of fragments of the cross, dogwood, by the way, that Jesus was crucified on for coronation. At the coronation, they actually have fragments from the cross, and it's going to go through in a procession. Now, if you didn't know, dogwood used to be really tall, sturdy wood trees, and you could make crosses out of it, and you could crucify saviors. But after God punished dogwood trees, and now they're shrubs, you could not crucify somebody, I don't think. I don't even think it's biblical. I think it's sort of one of these things that's been added on later. Yeah, according to the story, it was the dogwood tree that provided the wood upon which Jesus was crucified. And this is from plantmegreen.com. Now it goes on, and this is mostly, I think, a legend. The legend holds that the tree was once very large like an oak, and because its wood was strong and sturdy, it was used to build the cross upon which Jesus was crucified. But because of its role, God cursed the tree to be small, so it would never again grow large enough to be used in a crucifixion. Yeah, this time they used AK-47s. What did they use to shoot the second coming, JFK? They didn't use 3 nails in a tree. They used 3 bullets. If you believe the QAnon lore that the second coming was JFK. Anyway, it says the tree was also blessed to produce beautiful flowers every spring, just in time for Easter. How is that blessed? I mean, wasn't Easter when the bad thing happened? Anyway, there you have it, a little bit of extra biblical lore. But the Pope gave 2 fragments from the cross. And my question is, if we were to examine these fragments, would they be different from the dogwood of the day? Would they be larger, sturdier pieces, unlike dogwood? Like this is the pre-cursed dogwood. Very curious. Maybe NASA should send a couple shards of petrified wood from the moon to go along with this. This is from Daily Mail. The Pope gifts 2 fragments from the cross Jesus Christ was crucified on to King Charles so they can lead the monarch's coronation process. You know, when Notre Dame burned, they had the actual crown of thorns that he wore, and it was rescued by a firefighter who was also at the Bataclan psyop with the death metal, the Eagles of death metal, where the shooting happened. It was, obviously fake. And then he was also at some kind of ambush in Afghanistan. But anyway, he saved the crown of thorns. We have a lot of holy wood, don't we? Both pieces are shaped as crosses. One of them is 5 millimeters, one is 1 centimeter. And they're set into a larger silver crucifix behind a rose gemstone. A rose crystal gemstone. Now, the meaning of this, the rose is the goddess, the cross sticks, the cross is the man. And how is this? Well, the cross is a symbol of the sun and the solar cross and the four seasons, the goddess symbol and the Rosicrucians, the rose cross. Even the Scientologists have the symbol of the rose cross. That symbol is inherent within the whole Thelemic cult. And if you watch the Super Mystery Babylon Super Bowl ritual, it was a rose cross ritual. The goddess, the rose represented there by Rihanna, and the god represented by the men in white. The Cross of Wales is a gift from the king to the church to celebrate something, but yeah, they're going to basically carry this thing. Unbelievable. A lot of pomp and pageantry. So there you have it, atheists. There's evidence. This is what the Mandela effect would call residue. I don't know how true this is, but I read somewhere that if you took all of the wood from all of the crosses, or rather, if you took all the wood purported to be from the cross, from all the reliquaries, and you would have put it together, you would have a cross like 40 feet tall. Okay, arkencounter.com. So I'm watching Fox and I see a commercial for the Ark Encounter, and it's open now. It's basically like a big ark, as I said. Kids are free, has 3 decks of world-class exhibits, virtual reality experiences, travel back to Noah's day. They even have a woolly mammoth on board. Experience a Bible history at the life-size Noah's Ark. Meet Noah, his family, and the animals on the ark. Family friendly. It's a theme park near Cincinnati. If anyone wants to go out there. But I'm watching this on Fox, and I'm thinking, okay, brainwashing as usual from the religious side. Then I go to CNN, and they're advertising a show, some kind of show called Sci-Fi Show. No, it's on the Sci-Fi Channel, and the show's called The Ark. But again, I'm just pointing it out. This is a repeated theme here. And it has to do with this doomsday cult that we live within. The bunker, the space ark, Wall-E. It's literally a spaceship ark. Why are they recycling biblical stories? It's because they're replacing them. That's why. Okay, continuing. We've had a lot of shootings this week. They've introduced a new form of PSYOP. One of the new PSYOPs is the wrong door PSYOP, where they're like, okay, child or teenager goes to an old man's door, knocks, gets shot. Girls basketball rolls into a neighbor's yard. She and her dad go to get the ball, get shot. Cheerleaders get in the wrong car, get shot. Pair of ladies go into a driveway, wrong driveway, get shot. This is a pattern, and they're all being talked about in context. It's all part of this idea that America is the Wild West, that we solve our problems with guns. It's a misperception, and I'm guessing that these are all fake for a number of reasons. I mean, the little girl that got shot or had shrapnel in her face, they had stitched her face, no bandage on it, and there's still blood on her shirt, and she's posing for the camera. And I'm like, I don't know if it would work that way. You've got the crime scene investigation, the guy's still on the loose. Are you going to put the victims' faces on TV? The eyewitnesses? I mean, there's all sorts of problems with how they present these stories. Diana South says, when will we hear the millions of other accounts of guns saving lives? Right, the good guy with the gun that stops the bad guy with the gun. Now, this is interesting because I was remarking on how only the left was incensed about mass shootings. The right didn't care because it was usually their guys doing it, and it was obviously for the gun grab agenda. But when these shooters started showing up as being left-wing shooters or trans-activist shooters, now they care. Not only that, but I noticed that the police responses have been different. Leading up to these recent events, the police were always slow to go in. Look at Uvalde. Look at Parkland. Look at another one that was very conspicuous was the Virginia Tech shooting from a few years ago. But the general template, even Littleton, the general template is the police are inadequate because they're outgunned. They're cowards, or maybe they just know they're outgunned. This is all part of the propaganda to turn us against these high-powered rifles. But the point of it is, the police have always been slow to respond, and the right wing has always criticized them for that, specifically with Uvalde. But now, with these latest shootings, the cops have been professional. They've executed it with perfection, and they're always being complimented. Like, oh, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were so professional. They took the threat out. They neutralized it. And you have people like Anderson Cooper using words like tactics. I'm like, okay, what are they trying to convey here? Well, for the right wing, seeing their bad guys taken out with precision, with these weapons that they see as in the hands of good guys, it's a win for them. Oh, look, good guys with guns can stop bad guys with guns. So now they're kind of cheering on the police versus these bad guy shooters. It gets them deeper into the story. Now they're actually cheering along with it. But again, before these shootings, the right didn't care. And this has been an ongoing thing. First, they tried shooting up country music concerts. So there you go, right wingers. Your love for America and guns and your gun culture, it's come back to haunt you. Americanism is killing you. But now they've backed off of that because that didn't really work. And now they're bringing in shooters that are from the left with manifestos. I mean, come on, a Redditor shooter? A Redditor shooter, it's like the counterpart to the Discord shooter, like the Buffalo guy that shot up the supermarket. And by the way, there's a parallel here. If you remember, the Buffalo shooter was said to have been radicalized by Tucker Carlson, who promulgated the replacement theory that whites are being replaced because they're all incels or whatever. And that story kind of put the focus on Tucker as this, agent, this radicalizing agent, which is interesting because this happens just after the new Batman movie comes out. The main enemy, the guy with all the question marks, is the Riddler. But his weapon is a carpet tucker, as in a tucker. Tucker Carlson sent the shooter. This is how they play these games. But they brought this narrative back where the black teen that was shot after ringing the wrong doorbell by an older white man, well, his grandson comes out and he says, yeah, his grandfather was racist because he's an American Christian male who watches Fox News. And I had said, watch, they're going to say that this man was radicalized by a Twitter feed that was emphasizing black on white violence. I was close. It wasn't that. But the agenda is the same. Mind viruses made him violent. Fox News. Meanwhile, Fox is being sued and everything else, which is all fake, as we all know. Again, the FBI is stalling the release of the Trans Nashville Shooters Manifesto. Now, this is also fascinating, and it ties into the Buffalo shooting. We're looking at the shooter. Her name was Aubrey Hale. Is it Audrey Hale? Now, this is the shooter who shoots the Christian school. It had a manifesto called they refer to it as the blueprint of total destruction, that it's very detailed. We haven't seen it yet. But if you look at her face, because this one is meant to be confusing, she kind of looks like Elliot Page. But she even has, in a lot of her photography, specifically the photos they show you first, she looks exactly like the girl from Stranger Things who plays Ellen. And there's some correlation here between, or her name is Elle, sorry, or 11. Her number was 11 in the MK Ultra subterranean base where she was turned into this thing she turns into in the movie where she's awakening these powers. But her name is Elle. And the Elliot Page resemblance, I think it's not coincidental because people weren't sure who this person was. Is it a male turned a woman? Whatever. It was meant to be confusing. But she also looks exactly like Elle in a lot of the earlier photography. And this stands out to me for a few reasons because the Buffalo shooting was at a place called Tops. And then you have the Uvalde shooting. Then Stranger Things comes on TV and they put a warning and it says, a warning, this might remind you of some of the recent news events. And in the first episode, Elle is playing with tops, like spinning tops with her psychic abilities before she kills all the kids. So you have all this imagery of dead kids everywhere and tops, and they have the Tops supermarket, the Uvalde shooting, and the Uvalde shooter had a very conspicuous resemblance to another one of the actors in this series. I've done some Metascript analysis and photo comparison of these actors to these shooters, and like the Highland Park shooter looks exactly like a Stranger Things character, not a coincidence. Diana South says L equals God. Yes. Diana South said a tucker is a dude who tucks his junk. Oh, well, the carpet tucker is what we're referring to because the Riddler is a carpet tucker. River Stick says FBI is where the truth goes to die. Joined by X322. Thanks for joining. It's Infinite Plane Saturday. It's Earth Day. How are you going to celebrate? How are you going to please Gaia? Are you going to compost your girlfriend? Are you going to self-immolate? Are you going to deflate the tires on your neighbor's SUV? All of these things are pleasing to Lord Ball. I've been noticing a lot of bad evidence circulating as truth among truthers because truthers are very subjective. Therefore, they're not actually truthful. The truth is objective. It just is. However, we live in a subjective world. The liars, as in the MSM, have their false worldview, which is countered by the truthers, which is also false, but they don't know because, of course, they're within a controlled paradigm. And I'm constantly seeing bad evidence floating around. Like this guy's JFK Jr. No, this guy is. And many of them don't even fact check what they're spreading. Oh, look, Ellen DeGeneres holding a girl, and someone in the comments says, oh, you got your next victim, and pizza emojis. Then it gets spread millions of times, and people are like, let's do something about Ellen DeGeneres. Ginning up a mob because she's a child killer now. Well, it turns out that was her niece, and she's all grown up now. And the comment section that talked about the victim with the pizza, yeah, that was fake. Like the truthers are just as likely to use deep faked news as the liars are. Case in point, this very popular video among truthers, it's this bat hanging upside down, and it looks kind of humanoid. And it definitely looks creepy. And a lot of people share it because it's scary millions of times. Turns out it's a prop from Disneyland. And just got me thinking about how we live in a Disney universe. It's kind of a Marvel universe at times. It's a good way of describing it anyway as a fictional universe, but it's definitely Disneyland. And if you think about it, if you were born in Disneyland and you grew up like that, yeah, you might be forgiven for having a very blinkered worldview. And I think that the world we live in is basically Disneyland. It's a little more expansive, but it has a few other groups of characters and environments. But for the most part, we live in a Disney universe. And by the belief or the ignorance of the people who just continue to spread it. Like here's a comment from Les Luther. If you follow anybody on Twitter, you should follow Les Luther, L-E-Z, Luther. He coined the term illusion warfare. Like I say psyops. Shills or the uninformed will say false flags. But psychological warfare, psy-war, makes more sense, and it's better. Like a hoax is a tactic. A psychological operation might require a number of tactics. It might be a whole strategy. But we're in a psy-war. And this psychological war, it's a war that takes place in the minds of believers to get them to believe something happened and get them to all act in concert as though it did happen. And they're able to fake it till they make it. And here's what he wrote, because he's talking about what I'm describing, the truthers who just share stuff. He said, illusion warfare. If you participate in spreading and disseminating the illusion, you're now complicit in manifesting the illusion into existence. Ego-driven desires for likes and shares are used by those that manipulate mankind. And he's always calling out truth or chicken feed. But this is a great example of it. People sharing a lot of the Pizzagate stuff without fact checking it, just saying, well, it might as well be true. Okay, well, that's not how reality works. But you're complicit in manifesting the illusion of the thing being true. And then the illusion is used to radicalize people or drive people to certain conclusions, leading them on. And that's how this thing works. Hillman Avenger says other people's standards of evidence are so low they've been hypnotized. 100%. And Rocco says, I love your village analogy. I like the village analogy because it's perfect for describing the world that we live in and how you might get out, how you might escape their false paradigm. And in this one, it's about a communist village. It's commune. And it looks like it's in the 18th century. It's certainly not the 20th. It's a few hundred years back. But the people born in it are totally unaware that there is a 20th century. Their parents or the so-called elders don't tell them. And elders, etc. The elders not only don't tell them that they're in a commune and there's another world beyond, but they tell them out in the wilderness are the wicked people and the demons, the monsters. You can't go out there. And at night, the males stand guard at the perimeter of the village. Meanwhile, the children hide in the basements whenever there's any kind of like disturbances. They hear the monsters outside, everybody goes into the basements. And it just seems like a routine. They live and they're happy despite the fact that they know that these monsters are out there. Well, later in the movie, you find out that the adults, the elders, put on monster costumes and put on a big show to keep everybody scared. Now, why would they do this? It's because all of them decided to leave the world. They said the world's too violent. We want to create a perfect world, a utopia. And they left the modern world and created this false construct where they're not going to have any of the negativity from the world, none of the contamination. So it was an attempt at purity. Now, the village is surrounded by bushes that have these red berries. And they're told, if you see, it's a banned color. If you see this color, turn around and go back. All the monsters wear red. Now, this perimeter of red berries is there to, of course, scare everybody. But also it serves as sort of an analogy for the forbidden fruit, the apple. In other words, the ones who take the apple know the difference between good and evil. They're no longer fit. They get kicked out by the elders, the Elohim. It's the same thing. In this case, the ones who go beyond the red find out that they're in a false world. They jump a fence. They find in the 20th century, they're no longer fit for the program. And they have to decide if they're going to stay and be a part of it or if they're going to. And the only people who through it are, well, you got the free thinker who seems like he's suspicious of the elders. He knows he's being lied to. Then you have the village idiot who's entertained by it. He thinks that the drills are funny. It doesn't work on him. And then the other one is visually impaired. She can't see it. And she's not effectively terrorized. But the movie, of course, is just, I think, explaining how our world works and that most of the conformists are perfectly happy. And it's a blissful state of happiness. And this is true. The people who believe the news as fundamentalists, who believe it as it is exactly, yeah, they may accept the dream world. And there's no cognitive dissonance. No matter how bad the news gets, at least they know what's going on. There's some comfort there. There's not this mass confusion. There's no cognitive disharmony, dissonance. But when you're figuring out something is wrong or you're being lied to and you dig, you're generally led into conspiracy theories that take what happened as reported at face value, but then add on to it. Oh, this happened, but there were these ulterior motives or these bad actors or it was a false flag. In other words, they're dragged deeper into the nightmare. They're no longer blissfully ignorant. And that's why the image of the truther, look at an Alex Jones, who was radicalized at Waco. Interestingly enough, there's some connections here with Waco worth exploring. But if you look at Alex, he's agitated. They're going to take our guns. They're turning the frogs gay. He's always freaking out. Why is that? Because the world to him is very unsettling. Because the unsettling truth is that the elite are going to kill us all. It's no longer this mundane normieville. Now it's conspiracyville. And what I'm suggesting is that is part of the program, and it's designed to turn people away from questioning the dream. Because why would you want to go into a nightmare? Just stay in the dream. Like the Matrix. You got Cypher who takes the blue pill. He's like, I don't want the red pill. It's too harsh. But I'm saying maybe no pills. Maybe the red pill and the blue pill are both variants of the same deception. One's a dream, one's a nightmare. Neither of them can be termed awake. Alex Jones was radicalized at Waco. He helped to rebuild the Branch Davidian complex. But we've been talking about this Waco thing and how Dave Koresh was Jesus Christ to these people. Well, interestingly enough, Timothy McVeigh, who was executed at 33 after bombing the Oklahoma City Fred Murrah building, that guy was 33 when he died, but he was there at Waco. He was there passing out anti-government literature. So Alex Jones, Timothy McVeigh, Dave Koresh. Of course, Jones and McVeigh were similarly activated base, but I'm pointing this out because this is all very scripted. If you didn't pay attention to 2020's scenario with the McCloskeys, the couple that were protesting BLM with their rifles on their front lawn, well, they were recreating the cover of the Turner Diaries, which is the white nationalist Bible that radicalized and I guess even guided Timothy McVeigh. Fascinating connections here. Again, Waco, Koresh, McVeigh, Alex Jones, Trump kicking off his 2024 campaign in Waco, calling it the final battle. Very apocalyptic. And then Netflix, who pickpocketed me the other day, Netflix releases the series Waco, American Apocalypse on 3/22, a couple days before Trump's first day on the new campaign trail. Yeah, I had a wallet that I lost, canceled the card, got a new card, and after 3 months without Netflix, they managed to bill me in the middle of the night, which at first I'm annoyed. I'm like, how do they do it? But then I decided, well, let me go ahead and check out what's on. And that's when I started watching this Waco American Apocalypse. And it's like they had 12 million rounds, no, 1.6 million rounds. I'm like, wait, 1.6 million rounds? And the DHS has 1.6 billion. And of course, Waco is about grabbing the guns. And Alex Jones says, DHS has 1.6 billion rounds. And if you try to take our guns, we're going to have 1776 again. I mean, these numbers and these characters associated with these specific events are telling us a very specific story, all leading to 1/6 in the storm, obviously. All right, continuing. It is Saturn Day, 4/22/2023. I'm imagining that there's a lot of environmentalists out there setting themselves on fire, gluing themselves to paintings and laying in the streets. So watch it. If you're on the freeways, watch out for environmentalists. You know, they should go burn down the rubber trees. Isn't there only like one place in the world where they get all those? Is like Asia somewhere? Southeast Asia, you got the para rubber trees. The environmentalists should go burn those down. Gaia will forgive you. Slashing SUV tires. That's insane. Okay, let's continue. Climate hypocrites, nothing new. Like I read somewhere that if you have a cat, and a lot of these climate hypocrites are crazy cat ladies, your cat's carbon footprint is like way bigger than your SUV's carbon footprint when you look into the food and the resources that go into producing that food. It's really, cats aren't sustainable. Sorry. Continuing here, going through my notes at minds.com/infinite plane society. How the heroin like power of Fox News nearly killed Ralph Yarl. Here we're returning to the story of the 84-year-old white man who was racist, who shot the black teen. This is from rawstory.com. Raw investigates how the heroin-like power of Fox News nearly killed this kid. Quote, simply spotting the Fox News masthead may be enough to prompt some whites to expect that blacks are guilty. Research finds Fox News has regularly blamed black people for rioting. News' website is more likely to show blacks and stories about crime. This in turn suggests that Fox News is reinforcing racial stereotypes. Astonishing research reported 4 months ago in the Washington Post found that Fox News is so frequently associated with bigotry and hate that just tuning into Fox News might be enough to activate racial bias. Now, again, I did call this, and I wasn't the only one noticing that about a month ago, there was something going on where suddenly a lot of Twitter feeds are just sharing a whole lot of black on white violence, like nonstop, no context, zero context. And we have to remember too that criminals are the minority in any group. You can't extrapolate from what a small group does to the whole group. But I'm seeing stuff spreading like Walmart got looted in Chicago, and Luke Rudkowski's like, "Uh-oh, Chicago's going to die. Their Walmart got shut down, got looted." I'm like, "That's from 3 years ago," but it doesn't matter because he's a truther. He just shared it, and Elon Musk retweets it, and he says, "Wow, it looks like Fallout." Okay, your basis for comparison is a video game, one, and two, you're looking at old recycled footage with no context. And I said, it looks like they're creating tunnel vision on Twitter, where now people are going to be thinking we're in the middle of a race war. And then you see all the people predisposed to buy into these stereotypes jumping in the comment sections and piling on. This is how they wage war. It's an echo chamber effect. They throw people into these echo chambers. And when I saw this shooting, I thought, watch, they're going to say he got stuck in a Twitter echo chamber. I was close. It was Fox. Sledge says, how would you combat climate change, Tim? Well, climate change to me is such a dishonest misnomer. I mean, let's just call it what it is, global warming. And the global warming theory didn't quite pan out, but they didn't want to cut off the money. I mean, so if you can't really cancel climate change any more than you can cancel the wrath of God. It's a religious paradigm. And, I've been saying that this is a religion for a long time. Well, today, Time.com put out an article, quote, "The case for making Earth Day a religious holiday." And this perfectly times in. This times perfectly. This is timed with Avatar 2, the World Economic Forum 666. This is timed with the environmental activism we recently saw in Atlanta. And remember, the blue marble, the photo of the Earth they showed us 50 years ago, that is what kicked off the environmentalist movement. That radicalized environmentalists. They saw, oh, look, the Earth is in trouble. It's all alone, dangling in space, and we're destroying it. Let's save it. It made them conscious, Gaia conscious. Well, this latest Avatar movie, I watched it and I did a review on it, and I was like, you know what? This is recreating the blue marble effect for a new generation. They're bringing us back into Gaia consciousness, and I've been right. And I said we're moving into an era of Gaia worship. And now look here, it says, and this is from Time, Earth Day is upon us, a little non-holiday between Easter and Passover. But if Super Bowl is America's unofficial national day of celebration, Earth Day is a collective yawn that brings a shrug. Now it says, for those of us environmentalists, this person is describing how this is the 53rd Earth Day. We thought it would be useful to pose what a real Earth Day should represent and how this could form a central line for a new approach to worship. Before we step further into that loaded word, let's back up. The first Earth Day was 1970. It brought 20 million people, a tenth of the US population, to the streets. According to CBS News special report, many high schools announced they would excuse absences, and Earth Day 1970 was the largest single day protest in human history. Now that's a psyop. Goes on to say, more or less here, that let's look at what established religions get right and let's take a cue. The first step, unearthing the nature-centered origins of our existing religious holidays. Now, this is an important point here. It goes into how all of our holidays are based on the timing of the seasonal changes. And those of you familiar with astrotheology know that that is absolutely the case. This is why we have Easter when we do. This is why we have Super Bowl, I often remark, takes place on Candlemas. They do coordinate major events with pagan holidays. I mean, look, the next major pagan holiday, point of the year, in fact, is May 1st, Beltane. So expect fires, expect communist fires in about a week. It's also Travis Scott's birthday. Travis Scott, who didn't have to serve any time in jail after he auto-tuned like 9 people to death at that Astro World. It's also the anniversary of the Church of Satan. Sledge says, is Gaia really our collective consciousness? Well, Gaia is the god of the earth, but they've been trying to convey this idea that the earth is sentient. In Avatar 2, James Cameron really put out this notion that Pandora is sentient and the Pandora Navi tap into it. Like they take their long braids and they plug it into a fish. They plug it into a tree, like a USB cord, and they communicate with their planet's consciousness, Pandora. But at the very beginning, you find out that Earth, that Gaia was sentient and the humans killed her. That's why they had to go to Pandora. We killed Gaia. Now, this story about the sentience of the planet tied into this environmentalist protest in Atlanta, which ties into Avatar 2, The Way of Water, about these Atlanteans, where they shot an environmentalist activist through the palms of his hands. They Christified him. And this was a few months ago. But I was talking about this because they're trying to get us used to the idea that the planet is sentient. And they were protesting the police who want to clear cut a forest and build a police training camp. Meanwhile, they call themselves Defender of the Forest. They're living like the Navi. Now, the World Economic Forum, 666, the ones who want you to eat bugs, they are working with what they call the Global AI Action Alliance, or Gaia. And the Gaia is a way to harness what they call the transformative potential of AI by accelerating its adoption globally. In other words, if everybody's connected to this global AI, and they call it Gaia, it's the World Economic Forum, it's not hard to really put together what they're creating here. They're creating something where now you're not going to plug your hair into a tree or a fish, you're going to plug your USB cord into your computer to tap into Gaia. They're creating a facsimile, a global consciousness, a neural network, but it's all going to be, of course, man-made. All right, going through your comments. Dinah South says, KJV says the earth swallowed the old of Abel after his brother Cain murdered him. I'd like some more context there. These stories are all very intriguing. I think it's all allegorical. I've seen this one take on Mars and Venus as Adam and Eve. And if you trace the movements of these planets through the year, you actually follow the story with man's fall from grace. Very fascinating stuff. And it ties into the zodiac and, of course, the astrological symbols and their meanings and their stories. And as they move through them, it tells this story. I mean, this is why Pluto is the ruler of the underworld. All the planets are on a plane because the solar system is flat. And the only deviant is Pluto, which was discovered in 1930, the same year that Pluto the dog emerged at Disney. And the planet Pluto has Pluto the dog's face on it because we live in a Disney universe. But Pluto is 17 degrees below the ecliptic. That'd be the only exception. The underworld, Pluto is also the one who is known as Hades, and he releases the Kraken. It's sort of this modern take. I mean, a lot of these myths are updated. They do a lot of religious syncretism, and they merge a lot of these things. Like space is the new heaven. The obelisk representing the earth god risen savior has reemerged as the rocket. Sledge says, what's your take on the hole at the North Pole? Well, I've heard about the hole at the North Pole, but I saw this letter and it was from Mercator. It's between Mercator and John Dee. And they believed, or they claim, that at the center of the North Pole is a rock, a 33-mile in circumference rock. You can find it on Wikipedia. It's a phantom island that was believed to be a black rock located at the magnetic North Pole. described by Mercator. This isn't a conspiracy theorist. This is the guy whose projection of the world that we've all grown up with, even though it's known to underrepresent the size of the continents in the southern hemisphere. Hemisflat, whatever it is. But the Black Rock Phantom Island was believed to be a rock at the magnetic North Pole. Mercator said it was 33 French miles in size. And this explains why all compasses point to this location. The island was featured on maps from the 16th and 17th century, including those of Mercator and his successors. In 1577, he described it in a letter to John Dee. And John Dee is the one who coined the term British Empire. You know, he was a big proponent of introducing the Gregorian calendar. He's not a nobody historically. He's the original 007. And if you really look at the practices involved in what you would call cultism, Western occultism today, it doesn't start with Crowley. It starts with John Dee. Here's what John Dee wrote. And he wrote this this is what Mercator wrote to John Dee. In the midst of the four countries is a whirlpool into which there are four indrawing seas that divide the north. The water rushes around and descends into the earth as though it were pouring through a filter funnel. Right under the pole lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. Its circumference is 33 French miles, all of it magnetic stone. I don't know. I mean, I've heard that. I haven't heard about a hole in the middle, except from that plumber who called himself quasi-luminous. Then he changed his name to Satan. And yeah, he's convinced that at the center of the world is a hole, like a drain, which is interesting because he's a plumber. Commenter says they went to the moon with some cardboard boxes and a few shower curtains and duct tape and tin foil. Don't forget the DirecTV satellite dish so they could call back to the Earth. If you believe that, I don't know what to tell you. Right. It's kind of like atheists used to say, you know, they critically examine religions. But look, this is the difference. Have faith in your religion, believe what you want. But having faith in media is the opposite of intelligent. I mean, really, it's a bad idea. It's a pathological liar, and we all know this. But you know, people like atheists will make fun of talking snake stories. It's like, well, it's allegory, it's a metaphor, it's a symbol. And there's really no defense for it, but they're not trying to say they literally believe it. But now with these NASA myths, we're dealing with myths, but they don't know they're myths. They think these things are literally true. And you're like, well, explain to me petrified wood moon rocks. All they can do is get mad and attack you for not having any faith. You're not trusting their elevated priesthood. You don't believe that they went up so high into the heavens that they looked down at the earth and saw God's eye view and realized, you know what? Countries are dumb. Let's just have one world. Borders, boundaries, difference. No, let's just make everything one. Let's save the planet. Like you're supposed to believe they went up to space and they have the overview effect. Do you know what the overview effect is? You go so high, you see the earth and you transcend all of the things that keep us from saving the planet, from warring with one another, all the things that we do that keep us from being unified dissipate when you go high enough and you get the overview effect. I've seen pictures of people having it. I've seen it in videos. When people go to space and they look down, their jaws open very wide. We used to call it the overjaw effect. But looking down, they see a planet that needs saving and they go back down to save it. And they tell us what we need to do. Now, I think it's fake. I don't buy it one bit. They don't all have it. Some claim there's this thing called the ultra view effect, where if you stare out the back window, not at the earth, but if you stare into space, you'll get the ultra view effect in cosmic consciousness. Like you level up, you're a high priest now. If you want to believe any of that. In my view, the only objectivists in the world are auto-hoaxers, and the only people who can claim to have an overview effect are the Psywar perps and, again, the auto-hoaxers. We do have an off-world stage perspective. We do have an overview effect. That's why we do this. We are incorporating the bigger picture. But they're claiming the bigger picture is when you step back from the world and you see it, you got to save it. It's like, no, that's a false. They're not actually elevated priesthood. You're like, oh, these guys are high up there, they can see stuff. And that's the idea of the elevated priesthood. Like they levitate, they float, they've ascended. No, the truth is they're in a swimming pool. They're actually underground in a Hollywood basement. X322 says Quasi was a cutter. Yeah, Quasi-Luminists believed that you could write out a spell on a napkin, bleed on it, and then your soul would be saved, and that you would meet with all the other cutters in the center of the world. It was called and this even made mainstream news, this cult. It was called Blood Over Intent. Yeah, now I'm getting a Blood Over Intent was this cult that this plumber started that said that the center of the world was a big hole and that you could live forever if you could make it there. You just got to follow the compass. But before you go, you had to make a statement of intent on YouTube. And this was a trend where students on YouTube or people on YouTube were cutting themselves live and sharing the video, and they would read this prayer. I mean, it was blatantly satanic in a way. They were like, it is my desire to go into the hole in the center of the world, and they would cut themselves. Literally anything can trend. Like I make fun of environmentalists, but this is pretty severe. Here's an article from Vice.com. Teen accused of stabbing other student to death was into online blood rituals and conspiracies. A teen charged with murder. This was up in Canada. Dylan Pountney was sharing content on social media about the world being flat and the election being stolen. He participated in a YouTube blood ritual established by a man who claims to be an incarnation of Satan. That would be Quasi-Luminous the plumber. Police were called to Christ the King High School after he stabbed a fellow student. He said, and this is the one who's facing one count of first-degree murder, he said, quote, "I'm serious when I say this. The world is dead already. It's in a state of upheaval. We're trapped in our bodies. We're trapped in a grid." Fascinating. He claimed that people on Earth are, quote, human prison bars, and that he's being gang stalked by demons. Fascinating. Very edgy conspiracy theory there. Cutting themselves as a form of salvation, letting blood out. It says in one video posted on YouTube a week before a stabbing, he bled onto a handwritten letter that said, quote, "I spill my blood to bring forth heaven on earth for the benefit of all mankind. Thank you, Mr. Satan." At the end, he said, "Our movement is growing." Now, Mr. Satan happens to be an anagram for Starman, the savior that's going to fall to earth and save climate change, according to the lore of David Bowie. Blood Over Intent was started by a YouTuber known as Quasi-Luminous, who claims to be Satan incarnate. He opened the Book of Life, he claims, in 2013, and he claims he has the power, that he alone has the power, to bring 144,000 people to paradise through a black hole in the center of the flat, hollow earth. But the only way to get in is to state your intent and spill your own blood on a YouTube video. In other words, when you go to heaven, there's a book of life. You open the book. If you're not in there, you go to hell. I'm going to go up there. They're probably not going to find my name. Quasi-Luminous made his own book of life. My name's not in that book either. But if you cut yourself on video and you shared it with him, he puts you in the book. You're safe to go jump into the hole in the middle of the world. All right, continuing. Earth Day, Saturday, April 22nd, 2023. I hardly paid attention to it until one year I saw this. This was like a movement. It's like, everybody turn off your lights, shut off all your power for 1 hour. They were trying to turn the world dark all at once. And I was watching on the news, it was the actor from Fight Club, Ed Norton. And Ed Norton is doing the Earth Day countdown, counting down until everything goes black. And I thought, wait a minute, this guy was in Fight Club and he does a countdown and everything goes black. They shut down our system. They reboot all of our credit scores. It's basically a hard reset as all the buildings collapse. And I thought, interesting that they would have a guy who did this in Fight Club counting down for Earth Day. And that's when I started to really pay attention to how these actors are used to advance various propaganda narratives based on the associations they built in the minds of the viewers. All right, again, eco-zealots have formed a group called the Tire Extinguishers, wreaking havoc on Boston as they slash tires on luxury SUVs, including Land Rovers and Mercedes. They put leaflets on cars that say, "Your gas guzzler kills." All right. Again, it's Earth Day. Just heads up, watch out if you're on the freeways. Make sure you don't run over anybody. They glue themselves to things. Okay, continuing. Dinosaur says, to celebrate Earth Day, I'm running every electrical thing I own simultaneously because I care. It's a huge advance forward that they were able to censor skepticism about climate change from TikTok. Just censoring it all together. Like this is like when they give themselves away. If it wasn't such a critical issue that they needed to constantly propagandize us, they wouldn't have to censor it. All right, moving on. Going through my minds.com/infinite plane society. Climate change is real. Climate change is here. SecGov's proposed rule on climate disclosure is essential to protecting investors and our economy. I'm finding so much now out there where they're just going straight on communist or eco-fascist, where JP Morgan is their CEO is like, yeah, let's go ahead and start seizing property to save the planet. Trump says, I'm the only candidate who will prevent World War III. Sorry, World War III already happened. It started on 3/11. It's the perpetual war. Like, how many times can they threaten World War III or civil war before it loses its ability to scare anybody? I don't think anybody cares anymore. But if you ask me, we are in a Psy war, and that would be the perpetual war. These various names, World War III, Civil War, doesn't matter. They're all covers for the psychological warfare. That is the rule, not the exception. All right, continuing. Daily Mail, the man who was jailed for John Lennon's murder might be innocent. They're talking about Mark Chapman, and they're proffering a new conspiracy theory about it. But John Lennon's not dead. John Lennon became Steve Jobs, and the connection between Apple and Apple pretty much says it all, in addition to the looks. But no, Steve Jobs, John Lennon, same person, just another fake death. Kind of like RFK or JFK or MLK. I cannot find any one of these ritually scripted, symbolic events. These events are always so scripted. They're timed in a certain way. I can't find any of them that seem real anymore, looking back. Even Waco. I'm looking back at Waco. You assume, it's a safe assumption, I guess, or it feels safe, that a lot of this stuff in their history books is real. But now that I'm looking at it, it's like, you know what? They didn't just start faking things recently. They didn't start with Obama. Some people will say, oh, it's the NDAA. They started faking stuff with Obama. No, they've been faking stuff since, I would say, the inception of media, which supplanted religion, which did what? Faked stuff. Like the fake parts of a cross that are going to be used in the coronation. I'm sorry, but that's not dogwood from 2,000 years ago, back when they were big as oak trees. All right. Well, this should be an interesting week. Quite a lot going on. I'm telling May 1st is the main communist holiday, May Day. May Day is a big pagan holiday. It's Beltane. It's the opposite side of the year as Halloween. But even though Halloween, you would think that's the main pagan holiday because you see them out there in their costumes. The truth is, the main one is actually coming up. So just a heads up, May Day. Generally speaking, I noticed that's when the left-wing mobs hit the streets. The weather's nice and everything else. We've already talked about the unicorn killer who recycled his girlfriend. We've discussed the recent spate of wrong driveway, wrong door shootings, all fake, trying to create the perception that we're living in the Wild West. Satan Con next week in Boston, says River Styx. Okay. Well, I think it's going to be the 57th anniversary of the founding of the Church of Satan. But over the next few days, look, we're leading up into an election year, but I'm looking at what's on the streets and the main issues. And they're ramping up the gun stuff as they're ramping up the anti-abortion stuff. Because if you go after the wombs, you rile up the left. And they're doing so just now with the abortion pills. And then you have on the right all these shootings and insecurity about guns and wombs, always a thing. I saw this bumper sticker on a car in front of me, two bumper stickers. One of them said, Black Lives Matter. And the one below it said, abortion is healthcare. And like, what are they saying? What are they saying here? Sometimes I think these are conflicting messages. Because I don't know. I guess I don't tend to get too deep into their cognitive dissonance, which is what it is on both sides. The way they conflate these issues, where on the one hand, the right is super in support of individual liberty and rights, except in these instances. And they create these mutually exclusive categories. Like, for example, Black Lives Matter is predicated on this inherent bias within policing. And then the right is like, no, we love the police. They're on the opposite side. But then what about all the auditors or the sovereign citizen types or the ones who are against police state? They're always quiet when it comes to these events that start off the riots. Like, for example, they're on by default. The right is by default, since they're against the communist mob, they're made to side with Derek Chauvin. It's like, I don't side with Derek Chauvin. I would never side with him, but I don't want to side with the communists. It's like, well, what do? Do you side with the Proud Boys or the Soy Boys? Antifa or Patriot Front? But again, as I was saying at the very beginning, these sides tend to resemble one another the more extreme they get. And I used to think that was a cliche, but no, it's actually true, as evidenced by Alex Stein, who went from the number one anti-groomer, anti-drag queen protester to a drag show on The Blaze. He went full circle. Diane in the South says they ramp up the gun confiscation stuff to drive up sales. Yeah, I don't think it's for any other reason than to ramp up general anxiety about these things. And of course, the psychological operations are just there to influence opinions, but there's no action ever attached to it. They've never actually tried to do some mass gun grab. But the template responses are, there's a mass shooting, the right will say mental illness, not the guns. The left will say gun culture. And they've maintained this line, but with these recent shootings, now they're looking at it as, like the right is looking at it as the left is arming up. And that Redditor shooter who shot up the bank because he was anti-gun, again, that makes zero sense. That would never happen. But they're using this again as an example of, it's like they're trying to ramp up the agitation on both sides, but it never does explode into civil war. They're never going to actually let that happen. There is no end. There is no climate day of doom where suddenly it floods. They always push it back. Vaxageddon never happened. That was a lot of useless fear for 3 years. That's why the anti-vaxxers are forced to manufacture stuff like Stu Peters does all the time. And as much as the media agitates for some kind of a quote race war, it only really happens on TV. This is why they want you at home watching TV. So you mistake that for the real thing. Do you remember the phenomenon of empty hospitals? It's like you're supposed to believe all the hospitals are full. Every one of them, they're so packed that bodies are falling out the top windows. They got auxiliary tents outside. They got coolers outside in these big trucks because they're full. Then you find out, no, actually they're empty. But you wouldn't know if you only watched TV. And we found multiple instances of stock footage from very busy emergency rooms being shared in Italy, in San Diego, in New York. And they're like, oh, this is the epicenter. No, that's recycled footage. Commenter says, any more school shootings expected? Well, the thing is, they're hiding this manifesto because they say it'll trigger some kind of copycat event. But the school shooting agenda, I thought was largely played out until they came up with this new twist. But this was targeting a Christian school, and it was coming from a leftist. The other one was a bank shooting. They've pretty much phased out school shootings for the most part. I don't know if they're going to continue with the supermarket thing. If you remember after Parkland, one of the complaints from the anti-gun types were like, hey, you guys don't care because they're happening in the schools. We're the mass shooter generation. So they took it out to the supermarkets and they would do what they called die-ins, where they played dead and they would have signs that said, you killed us with your Second Amendment. Like they were already then saying, we got to do these things in supermarkets to get people's attention. And do you remember Extinction Rebellion, where you have a lot of climate activists would go run into museums with all the dinosaur bones or the plaster models, and they would play dead? Because if we don't change our ways, we're going to go extinct. And I'm like, I don't get it. Don't you guys want us to go extinct? Like the party of misanthropy, the anti-human left, suddenly cares. There's no consistency between left and right. These are mutually exclusive categories. You can't be right on all issues and take a side. But again, it's by design. It's never going to be rectified. That's never going to be reconciled. But this leftist shooter thing is a twist I didn't see coming, and it's the talk of the right. And we're awaiting a manifesto, so I look forward to that. Hopefully it's not recycled. Most of the manifestos we've seen, from Brenton Tarrant to the Buffalo shooter, these things were all kind of plagiarized from, Anders Breivik, who plagiarized from the Unabomber. They're all being written by the feds, basically. And speaking of feds, there's Special Agent Weissapal, who is pretty obviously Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh obviously was not executed. He works for the FBI. Haven't figured out who Dave Koresh is, but I'm pretty confident that he did not burn to death in that ritual psychological operation. All right, continuing. Diana South says they phased out monkeypox, COVID, Biden laptop. Oh yeah, the mass mind is a cat, and the mass media is a sadist with a laser pen, and he's just constantly redirecting them. Peruvian shamans are performing a ritual on Earth Day right now. They're gathered around a big idol of a globe and shaking plants and celebrating. They got a snake. Now, I don't know what it's very shamanistic, but they're celebrating a globe. It's like, don't you guys realize that the globe is the model, not the reality? Gaia worship. But that's Gaia worship for you. Now, left and right are merely directions. These aren't objective positions because the world is purely subjective, especially theirs. The right and the left are merely directions. Objectivity exists either above it, as in capstone level those who are the manipulators behind the scenes, the ones who are directing the sidewar, the metascriptors, the insiders, and then, of course, those of us with the off-world stage perspective. And this off-world stage perspective is valid. We may not have all the information, but we know what the false explanations are. We know what we know, and we know what we don't know. We know that we don't know. Most of what constitutes this false worldview is a consequence of lies by omission, what they don't tell us. Oh, most of it we don't know. We're surrounded by darkness. Copaesthetic says no female mass shooters until now. Yeah, I've been waiting for that, and it was that's why I first saw it, and I was like, wait, hey, look, it's Women's Month, and it went out with a bang. Good on them. Then I thought, okay, okay, now it's another one of these examples of a trans woman taking up space that should have belonged to the first female. But then we find out that this was a very confusing instance where we don't actually know. Like, she wasn't unequivocally, unabashedly a cis female. So I kind of say it doesn't count. Although the first female shooter was in 1979, there's a song about it called I Don't Like Mondays. And she did a shooting because she went to school and it was a Monday. She wasn't happy about it. But that was long before the mass shooting era. So I guess we are up and down. Yeah, the way it works, the lie world order. And I made an ebook called The Lie World Order. You can find it pretty easily if you search Amazon. Is on the very bottom level, you have the world stage. All ignorant, all believers. Believers going left, believers going right. And above it is the pyramid of liars. The lie structure, the lie system, the lie world order. And on top of that is the capstone. Those who have the overview. They can see the world of lies. They see the lie manufacturing apparatus for what it is. So they're up and they have that view. But again, we are outside. We're not really up there with them. There's outside and inside. We exist simultaneously on the world stage, but also in the areas that have been omitted. We are in the areas they have deemed darkness, non-existent. This area does not exist, but it does. And we include that with everything else. They say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Well, we're fully behind the curtain. That's why we're not triggered. I can't remember the last time I was triggered or I cried over an event on the news. I recognize it for what it is. It's the bread and circuses. All right, this has been a great Earth Day. We will continue. It's going to be a religious holiday. Called it here. Always has been anyway, because we do have a de facto state religion. We have a state church. It's called the MSM. They just don't tell you that. Cope says the dupes are the fuel for the clown world. Yes, that's absolutely true. The dupes are the fuel. They keep it going. They're the ones with the likes and the clicks and the retweets. It's a massive church, and it's synchronizing minds, and it creates a hive mind. It creates groupthink. And groupthink, thinking, and stereotype, these are all ways to stop the individual from perceiving as such. Like, if you find yourself falling in lockstep with any of their ideologies, especially the racial ones, you've replaced your individual cognition with groupthink. If you trust the news implicitly and faithfully, you've replaced, in certain instances, your critical thinking with that screen. You've allowed Big Brother to download directly into your mind. Here you go, NWO sewage pipe directly into your mind. No need to filter it. All right, well, today's Earth Day again. It's the 57th anniversary of the Church of Satan coming up, May 1st. I'm expecting probably a lot of fires. And I do have one other prediction. There's this reoccurring theme I've noticed where once in a while they have to give us a reboot. Like right before 9/11, you had the movie Pearl Harbor. 9/11, and they said, oh, this was this generation's Pearl Harbor. Avatar 2, this generation's blue marble. And I think we're going to see something very soon. I have a bit of a prediction, and it has to do with radical trans activists and guns, because I'm seeing a lot of violent rhetoric coming from that demographic, and I see the reaction from the right. And I think what we're going to see is this. Because remember, when Dave Chappelle went out there and he talked about TERFs, trans exclusive radical feminists, he put it out there because he's a government agent, a jester, and he puts out there whatever goes into the programming. Remember, Netflix was founded by the the great nephew of the founder of PR, public relations, Edward Bernays, blood relative to Sigmund Freud. Netflix is mind control central. There's no jokes that are uttered on Netflix that don't go through this filter. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, they're doing something here. And here's what I'm guessing. Just as they used Blue Marble, they rebooted Blue Marble with the, I guess, 50 years later with the Avatar movie. I think they're going to recreate something. It has to do with a riot. I think it's called the Stonewall riots. This is a prediction I actually have. The Stonewall riots were 1969, took place in June in New York City. And this is what started the Pride Month. It was some kind of violent riot against the police for shutting down their nightclubs. And I'm guessing that we're going to have a repeat of Stonewall, but this time it's going to be for trans inclusion. That's why we have this picture being painted of trans activists getting radical and they're trying to be excluded. I think they're going to reboot it. And it's part of this repetition that goes into the mind war in general. So look out for armed gun persons next month. And then for the rest of the day, watch out for self-immolating environmentalists. All right, this has been great. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Go to patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society. I will send out live stream notifications and archives as I get them. It should be a very interesting week. Things are going to be heating up, and we're rounding the next part of the year, which I think it's riot season. So lots to look forward to. Also, if you go to infiniteplane.media, you can get press passes, and I've reopened the art store on eBay and otherwise. So thanks again for all of your patience. And soon we'll be back to taking calls. Very soon. Just need to get into an office space, set up the old computers, but we're going to be back bigger and better than ever. Longer live streams, guests, open phones, and I might even work with a new phone system, one that has a caller queue, which I used to do, because then I could take back-to-back calls. Anyway, it should be great. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great time, and take care.